Yeah, do you have much hope for the future of literary fiction? I was talking about this with my last guest, Matt Gazda, who's also being published
Yes.
by Arcade. You know, it's a really tough situation, I think, for the younger generations.
Well,
because people, you know, I see the people younger than me, and I don't know if they're ever going to read novels.
Well, I disagree with you, and I'll tell you why. You know, you mentioned Arcade, and maybe 3 books ago, I wrote a book called The Marvel Universe, and I wrote that for a publisher, a very respected publisher in California, because my East Coast book deals had expired, and I thought it would be serendipitous to come full circle and be published where my first book was published, even though that was a self-published book, and to come home to LA in essence. And this was a place where I met with the publisher in Los Angeles. I think they were originally in San Francisco, but were very well thought of and well spoken of. He had followed my work for a long time and was a big fan of mine, was very happy that I was going to publish with them. When I delivered the book, he was appalled, and it was obvious to me he had sensitivity readers, gender, body positivity, language, etc.
They had all the sensitivities.
All the sensitivities and more. And we were looking for a place, you know, I mean, he had literally said to me that they could only publish 35 pages of a 500-page book. And so we looked elsewhere. My agent, Andrew Wiley, found The Last House on the Block, which was Skyhorse, with the fearless supporter of the artists named Tony Lyons. And so I wound up publishing Marvel Universe myself. I released it as, it's not really accurate what I just said. I released it online into the public domain. I didn't want to charge $1.20 for it. I didn't want to do any of that. So within a week, it was available on Amazon by a publisher that from Vegas that specializes in printing public domain.
Yeah. They just swoop in and then they charge what, like $5 a pop for it or something?
Well, it was more than that.
Yeah.
But Sam Wasson, a friend of mine who's a wonderful writer, who's written books on Bob Fosse, on the making of Chinatown, the wonderful Coppola book about Zoetrope those years, and is working on a book of Frank Capra now. Sam decided he wanted to start publishing books, so he chose my book, and we did a limited edition of 500 that sold out of Book Soup. There was soon a very expensive a fan fiction book that was published, a huge coffee table style hardback of the Marvel Universe. So in a very short period of time, there were 3 editions of the book available, and it will never go out of print, you know. So that was an interesting experience. The next idea I had for a book was called Roar, and there was interest in publishing Roar on the East Coast, but when they learned that the protagonist was a biracial man whose mother was a black woman who became a famous jazz singer, a la Billie Holiday, and his father was a white man, a Ku Klux Klaner who had raped this woman when she was 14. And then my protagonist also is someone who had transgender surgery in his late 60s. Well, that was problematic. I think mostly because I'm an old white Jew. You know, there are rules now as to who can write about what. So Tony published that. It was the most beautiful hardcover book I ever had in all my years of writing, 12, 13, 14 novels. And so Tony became a huge advocate of mine, as I am of his. And he had bought an imprint called Arcade, which was started by Richard and Jeanette Seaver many, many years ago. Richard Seaver had essentially discovered Samuel Beckett for America.
That's right.
And brought him to Grove, where Seaver then worked. They then formed a publishing house called Arcade. So Arcade had a very storied history. I met with Jeanette Seaver. Tony and I took her to breakfast, and I said, wouldn't it be extraordinary if we could restore Arcade, which had become a kind of repository of many different kinds of books, some that weren't strictly literary, probably belonged at a different imprint at Skyhorse. She was thrilled with the idea. She was still working for Tony. You know, Tony's that kind of a person, and only recently has stepped back. So we were going to begin looking for writers, and then circling back to what you were mentioning earlier, I thought, are there any writers? Do you know,
it's a fair question.
Well, I was soon. It was revealed to me soon that there are, and they really care about language, and they also have an adroitness and aptitude for narrative. Your book is one of them.
Well,
with Arcade. No, I was telling you earlier that your use of language is vivid yet subtle. You know, that's very hard to pull off. So we have, in a short period of time, we have not only do we have books by established writers, like David Mamet and William Bowman, I think we're going to be doing something with. But we have a new crop of writers, millennials, most of them, which makes sense to me because it takes a moment to get as far as the writers that I've seen in terms of those submissions have come. It's not something you can do. There are anomalies, but in your early 20s, you're not there yet. It takes a lot of time. So we have, I think in the next year, Frederick Barthelme, who is, I think, in his 80s, who is the brother of his well-known sibling, Donald Barthelme. We're bringing out a book of his collected stories with the foreword by Bret Easton Ellis. And then we have people like you, an extraordinary writer named Ben Faulkner, who we're publishing, an extraordinary poet and first-time novelist, whose book Vivian we published a few months ago, Emily Russo, Matthew Davis. We are. I have been privileged to be to have my eyes opened a little bit, Noah, because I thought, like like many people do, I think it comes easily to them that fiction is over, and how can anyone be writing fiction that isn't just some miniaturist, some collector of obscure artifacts, you know? But it's in our DNA to tell stories. So the idea that human beings no longer tell stories, AI aside, and all the nonsense aside, is I think it's essential to many who are to the manner born.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I think I need to get my most pessimistic take out, like, into the ether in order to live my more optimistic take. Like, for instance, we're going to read tonight. Like, I think a lot of people will be there. You know, I go to book events like at the Strand or like, you know, this I think will be bigger than those events. Like, you're going to see, you know, people in this city are excited about things like this, things like what Arcade is doing.
Yeah.
And we were saying before we were on air, it is really exciting because I think a lot of publishing houses are in that place where it's kind of a potpourri and they don't really have a vision. With Arcade, you see the vision, and it's like, it's exciting.
Yeah.
You know, reading the different people that have been collected there.
David Fishkin has a wonderful literary detective story that we're publishing. Is Gazda going to be there?
I actually don't know.
His book is exceptionally good.
Yeah.
Exceptionally good. So that's interesting to me. And it makes sense to me that when I made this pronouncement to Jeanette Seaver, there was no one on my horizon. And Stefan Zaguta, who's most of our editor, he has a kind of genius as an editor. And I've seen a lot of editors in my time. And so he's extraordinarily impressive. But I don't think he was really on board when I had this conversation with Jeanette and Tony a few years ago. He wasn't yet hired. So things come together in a mysterious ways. And so now, we have a new wave, and a kind of rebirth of Arcade. And I'm as surprised as anyone.